Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today's Deep Dive is custom tailored specifically for you, and we're jumping headfirst into everything you need to know about finance.
And just before we really get into it, a quick but important point. Everything we're discussing today, it's based on factual data information from public materials.
Exactly.
It's purely for your understanding, giving you the full picture. It is definitely not financial advice.
Absolutely. Consider us your guides today as we navigate, well, the really exciting world of advanced nuclear energy. We're zeroing in on two companies making quite a bit of noise: Nano-Nuclear Energy, that's NNE, and Oklo Inc., or Oklo.
Right. And our mission basically is to unpack what makes them tick. We'll look at their technologies, how they're approaching the market, and yes, how their stocks have been doing lately.
So by the end, you should have a really solid grasp of these two innovators.
And how they fit into the bigger energy picture.
Okay, so first things first, let's set the scene. There's a lot of buzz, a real growing excitement around nuclear energy again, wouldn't you say? Especially these smaller, more adaptable reactor designs. People are calling it a nuclear renaissance.
It definitely feels like that. It's driven by, well, a few key things. The push for clean, reliable power is huge, obviously, because of climate change. But also, these new designs, these SMRs, they're just fundamentally different.
How so? Different from the huge plants we usually think of.
Exactly. They're smaller, often designed to be factory built, which could make them quicker and maybe cheaper to deploy. Plus, the safety advancements are significant. They're seen as game changers for providing clean power reliably, without the massive scale and lead times of traditional plants.
Got it. And this isn't just theory, right? We're seeing companies actually hitting the mark.
Precisely. Which brings us back to NNE and Oklo. They both went public on U.S. exchanges back in May 2024.
Okay, tell us about that debut.
Well, Nano-Nuclear Energy, NNE, they started trading on NASDAQ at $4 a share. Their IPO raised about $10.25 million in gross proceeds.
$10.25 million. And Oklo.
Oklo took a different route, debuting on the NYSE. Their initial price was higher, $15 a share, and they brought in a lot more capital, $306 million in gross proceeds.
Wow, quite a difference in fundraising right out of the gate. How did the market react initially?
Interestingly, their first week performances were almost opposite. NE actually finished that first week up around 13%, closing at $4.51, a decent start.
And Oklo, given the bigger raise.
Well, Oklo actually went the other way. It closed down over 50% from its opening, ending the week at $8.45 per share.
Over 50% down. Shows how unpredictable these things can be, especially in new tech sectors.
Definitely highlights the volatility, but that was just the very beginning.
Right, so let's jump forward. How have they performed more recently? Looking at the picture since the start of this year, January 1st, 2025, up to around June 20th.
Okay, yeah, the picture changes quite a bit. Despite that initial drop, Oklo has actually had a phenomenal run since January 1st. We're talking a return of 173%.
Wow. What's the share price now then?
As of June 20th, it was trading around $57.95.
Okay, and what about NNE? They had the better start initially.
NNE has also performed very strongly. Since January 1st, it's returned 48.1%, trading at $37.31 as of that same date, June 20th.
So both showing significant gains in 2025, but Oklo really taking off. What does that translate to in terms of overall company size, market cap?
Good question. As of that date, NNE's market capitalization stood at about $1.54 billion USD.
Okay, 1.54 billion.
In Oklo. Reflecting that stock surge, its market cap was much larger, sitting at $8.54 billion USD.
$8.5 billion. That's a huge difference. Really shows how market sentiment can shift as companies mature.
Or as their specific strategies and partnerships start to become clearer. Investor confidence seems to have really grown, particularly for Oklo.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Let's dig into nano-nuclear energy first. What's NNE's unique approach? What makes their tech special?
Right, so NNE is really focused on the micro end of the scale, even smaller than typical SMRs. They call them microreactors.
Microreactors, like how small are we talking?
Their main designs are called Zeus and Odin, and these are in the 1 to 2 megawatt electric range. So 1 to 2 megawatt.
1 to 2 megawatts. What can that actually power?
Well, it sounds small compared to traditional plants, but 1 megawatt is actually enough power for, say, 1,000 homes, or a large industrial facility, or a remote community. The key thing is their portability and compact size.
And the tech itself? Is it brand new?
Interestingly, no, the designs are actually based on proven technology used in U.S. and NATO naval vessels, like submarines and aircraft carriers.
Ah, so it has a track record, kind of.
Right.
Reliability, safety, and demanding spots.
Exactly. That heritage is a big plus. It suggests robustness and a compact form factor that's already been tested.
Makes sense. Now, you mentioned their focus is microreactors, but what about the fuel? And are they just selling reactors, or is there more to their business plan?
Good question. They use a specific fuel called AIAU, that's high assay, low enriched uranium. But crucially, NNE isn't just about the reactors. They're aiming for vertical integration.
What does that mean in this context?
Well, they're actually planning to develop their own HALEU production facility. They're working on setting this up at the Idaho National Laboratory.
Building their own fuel supply chain, basically.
Pretty much, and it goes further. They're also the exclusive licensee for a patented type of transportation basket specifically designed for this AKU fuel. It's high capacity, which is
Wow.
important for moving fuel efficiently to potentially many distributed sites.
So controlling production and transport.
Right. And they're even looking internationally. They recently signed an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, with the Namibian government
Namibia. For what?
to explore developing a domestic nuclear fuel supply chain infrastructure there. So they're thinking supply chain, fuel, transport, the whole ecosystem around their reactors.
That's ambitious. So where do they actually see these microreactors being used? Who are the customers?
Given the portability, the applications are quite broad. Think industrial sites that need reliable power, large companies, definitely remote locations like mines or isolated communities where grid power isn't feasible.
Off-grid applications sound like a key target.
Absolutely. Even potentially powering things like satellites in the future. It really opens up possibilities for power in places that were previously very hard to serve.
Okay, let's touch on their financials quickly. As of March 2025, what do the numbers look like?
Well, like many deep tech companies in development, they're spending significantly. Operating expenses were $22.41 million. That was a big jump, over 1,200% compared to the year before.
Profit, or rather loss.
Yeah, net income was negative, negative $21.31 million. Again, a big change year over year, showing that ramp up in spending.
So definitely investing heavily in R&D and growth.
Exactly. But importantly, their cash position looked strong. Cash and short-term investments were up significantly to $118.80 million. Total assets reached $138.82 million.
Likely thanks to that IPO money, giving them runway.
Precisely. They have capital to pursue these ambitious plans, but it's clear they're in a cash-intensive phase.
Makes sense. And hey, just a quick pause here. If you're finding this kind of deep dive into finance and tech interesting, do give us a like or subscribe. It really helps us create more content you'll find valuable. All right, let's switch gears to Oklo. How does their approach compare? We know their stock had a rockier start, but then really took off. What's their story?
Oklo is also in the advanced reactor space, but they're working on slightly larger designs. They call them compact fast reactors.
Compact fast reactors. Okay, what does that mean and how big are they?
Their main design is the Aurora. It's designed to produce 15 megawatts, so 15 megawatts electric. And they say it has the potential to scale up to 50 megawatts.
So significantly more power output than NNE's microreactors. Still smaller than traditional plants, but definitely a different scale.
Exactly. It positions them for potentially different customers, maybe those needing more centralized, larger blocks of power.
And the fast part, does that refer to speed of construction or something technical?
It's technical. It refers to the speed of the neutrons used in the reactor core. Fast reactors operate differently than traditional light water reactors, and this ties directly into their fuel source, which is really one of Oklo's most distinctive features.
Oh. What are they using for fuel? Is it also HALEU?
Actually, no. This is fascinating. Oklo's strategy is heavily focused on using recycled nuclear waste fuel.
Recycled waste from existing conventional reactors.
That's the plan. They aim to take used fuel, which is a major challenge for the traditional nuclear industry, and use it as fuel in their fast reactors.
Wow, okay. That sounds like a huge potential advantage, tackling the waste issue head on.
It absolutely is. Fast reactors are particularly good at burning components of used nuclear fuel, extracting much more energy from it and reducing the long-term radioactivity of the remaining waste. It turns a liability into an asset.
And how long can these reactors run? Do they need constant refueling?
Their design aims for very long operational periods between refueling, potentially up to 10 years. They also emphasize inherent passive safety features built into the design.
10 years without refueling, running on recycled waste. That's quite a package. Who's interested in this? Any big names or target markets?
Yes, and this is where some high-profile connections come in. Sam Altman, the co-founder of OpenAI, was Oklo's chairman until fairly recently.
The OpenAI guy. Why the interest from AI?
Well, AI and data centers need absolutely massive amounts of reliable, clean power. It's a huge and growing demand. Altman stepped down as chairman in April 2025, citing the need to avoid potential conflicts of interest, as OpenAI itself was apparently entering energy supply talks, possibly with Oklo.
So the AI industry is definitely a key target. Any actual deals or agreements in place?
They have a pre-agreement with Equinix, which is one of the biggest data center companies globally, to potentially provide up to 500 MW of power.
500 megawatts. That's a lot of Aurora reactors.
It certainly implies a significant scale-up. They also have a letter of intent with Diamondback Energy.
The oil and gas company.
Yes, to potentially supply power for Diamondback's operations in the Permian Basin oil fields. So major data centers, large industrial users like oil and gas operations, these seem to be their prime targets.
Makes sense given the reactor size. What about their financials? Similar picture to NNE.
Broadly similar in terms of being in an investment phase. As of March 2025, Oklo's operating expenses were $17.87 million. Their net income was also negative at negative $9.81 million.
So like NNE, they probably saw a cash boost from going public.
They did, a very substantial one, reflecting their larger initial raise. Cash and short-term investments stood at $201.02 million, and total assets reached $302.15 million. So also well capitalized for the next stages.
Okay, so putting it all together now, we've got NNE with its super small portable microreactors based on naval tech, aiming for vertical integration with HAU fuel.
Right, targeting remote sites, industry, maybe even space.
And then Oklo with its larger, compact, fast reactors designed to run for a decade on recycled nuclear waste.
Targeting huge power users like data centers and oil operations with big names potentially involved.
So if you were to summarize the core differences, what stands out most?
I'd say it's primarily scale and fuel cycle strategy. NNE is about distributed, smaller-scale power with a focus on controlling the HALEU supply chain. Oklo is about larger, centralized power blocks with a unique solution focused on nuclear waste recycling.
Different tools for different jobs, essentially, but both part of this bigger shift towards advanced nuclear.
Exactly. They share that vision of advanced nuclear playing a bigger role, but they're carving out distinct niches. NNE is like offering highly adaptable power units for specific needs anywhere. Oklo is more like offering a dedicated waste-consuming power source for major energy consumers.
And both approaches have their own hurdles, right? Regulatory, technical, market adoption.
Absolutely. NNE needs to build out that whole HLEU ecosystem and prove the economics of microreactors at scale. Oklo needs to demonstrate its waste recycling fuel cycle works commercially and reliably and deliver on those large-scale power agreements. Both face the general challenges of licensing new nuclear designs.
Which leads us to the really big question, I suppose. What does this all mean for the future, especially for their stock? We saw that huge run-up in 2025.
Well, this idea of a nuclear renaissance seems to be gaining real traction in the markets. There's a clear need for the kind of clean, reliable, maybe even decentralized power these companies are promising.
Especially with energy demand soaring from things like AI.
Precisely. Data centers, electrification of industry, grid stability, advanced nuclear could potentially address all of these. So the stock movements we've seen likely reflect investor optimism about this potential.
But it's still early days, isn't it?
Very much so. The long-term stock performance for both NNE and Oklo will hinge on execution. Can they successfully build, license, and deploy their reactors? Can they sign binding contracts and generate revenue?
Secure those supply chains.
Exactly. Delivering on the technological promise and navigating the regulatory pathways are key. Continued progress there could sustain investor interest. Setbacks, obviously, could lead to volatility. It's a high potential but also high risk area.
So a final thought for you, our listener, to chew on. As the world desperately needs more clean, reliable energy, think about how these different strategies, NEE's microreactors versus Oklo's waste-eating larger units, might not just change electricity generation, but impact whole industries.
Yeah, consider the ripple effects. What could widespread deployment mean for energy independence, for hitting climate goals, for powering the next wave of technological innovation? It's a fascinating space to watch.
Absolutely. Well, that's all the time we have for this deep dive into nanonuclear energy and Oklo. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope this gave you a much clearer picture of these two innovators.